Hi, welcome to Nothing Ventured at the Game. As always, I'm your host with most, your GM Jared, and today I'm joined by Steve.
Yo.
And I'm going to call this a recall knowledge conversation, because we're talking about, mind blown. We're talking about instituting homebrewed magic items. So in our last session, I personally like trinkets or one-shot magic items. I'm a huge fan of those because they could be as crazy overpowered as you want, and they only it just uses it once. Like, obviously, don't be like, oh, use this and it stops the enemy, right? Unless you want it to, and you're okay with that because they're gonna hold it till they fight the big bad, and then that's when you're like, oh, it was a mimic.
And what was it? It's similar to like in Willow, where you had those stones where if you would touch it,
the acorn. Yeah, the acorns.
Yeah. Like, how powerful is that item?
Yeah, it was.
Come on.
Yeah, he only had
like
three.
Three or six, or however many.
It was like 3, and then at the very end, he like launched it. And
he launched it, and then it hit her, and then yet again,
she magicked it. Yeah,
she magicked it out. She magicked out of it. Which is super dope. But that's the kind of things that we're talking about.
Yeah, just stuff like that. And in our last session, I created a bunch of magic items and I gave it to the party. One of them was like a kind of like a piece of chainmail that was broken. And I was like, oh, if you use this, you have 1d4 rounds and it just doubles your AC. Doesn't matter. And everyone's like, oh my God, that's so powerful. I was like, yeah, but it's d4 rounds, not minutes. It's
days, weeks, months. Yeah. It's rounds.
So like I rolled 1. Okay, so this 1 round, that's it.
I actually think 1d4 is a little too strong in my opinion, but okay. This is the idea of these items is, look, as you go and as you get more experience as a DM, and if you like this concept, you're going to get a better idea of like, okay, what I gave them last time, a little too powerful. Let's roll it back a little bit. But these are one shots, so you can give something that's too overpowered, and then you then make a decision of, if you're going to give it to them again, how to curtail it. It's like, wasn't this D4 rounds last time? It's like, this isn't this one's,
not as useful.
Yeah, well, this one's the one you had before was like a pristine and perfect one, and this one's all like beat up and scratched and rusted out, and so it's not as good.
An imperfect copy.
Yeah.
And also you have to think of it like this: if you're giving them one-shot items, they first off in the game they blew 50 gold pieces.
Yeah. It wasn't given. We bought the items
for 50 gold pieces. They were one shots. One of them was a ring of healing that they had to insert.
They eat it.
You either ate it or put it like under a wound or something, and it healed you. But you had to consume the item of some fashion. And
that was hilarious.
Yeah. And then there was a black pearl that you threw it, and then it was a 10 by 10 or
whatever. 20 by 20 area that doubled all gravity.
Just doubled gravity. It didn't deal damage. It just doubled gravity, and you could play that as difficult terrain for the most part.
Easiest way to do it is like difficult terrain, or if you're playing in a system where you have like target numbers, like in Index Card RPG or in Viking Death Squad, you can that makes it hard, so that just increases the DC by 3, whatever the target number by 3. So that's these aren't specific to any one specific system. You can kind of use this concept, and funny enough, is Index Card RPG and Viking Death Squad, it's almost encouraged that you do this kind of thing. So you can kind of use this in any system that you want. Just kind of tailor the rules to fit that system.
Yeah, and so basically the concept are these homebrewed magic items and why you should homebrew magic items in your campaigns. So if you're fighting an evil wizard and you're fighting maybe like a low-level evil wizard, and you open up their chest, giving out scrolls, you have to tailor make them specifically in most systems to they say classes. Like if a wizard can only use these wizard spells and a bard can only use these bard spells. So if I'm like, oh, you found a
healing scroll,
resurrection scroll. Everyone's like, why would you give me this? Like, it's completely useless. I gave the party, because early on, one of my players was using a high dex build, and I gave them an arrow. It was like it was vine arrow. And the party was like, cool, none of us use range. And I was like, well, one person's high dex. And they were like, yeah, but I didn't build my character for a bow.
For a bow, yeah.
They were just high dex. Now they could grab a bow and be effective, but they weren't.
It's not the first thought when they're like, "Oh, I'm in the middle of a tense situation. Where's my bow?" No, they're not thinking about bow. Yeah. They're thinking of how they built their class and what the other players are doing. And if bow is like their second or third like emergency option for a weapon, it's not going to be something that they think of, because they may remember the bow, but at that point they've well forgotten about the item that they gave 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 sessions ago.
Yeah, they've gone so far, and they actually sold that arrow to get more items. Yes, they were like, we don't really want this, and that was.
I'm sorry.
They were like, we don't want this arrow.
Like, get rid of this.
They were like, this is stupid. And that's just the concept here. Is like tailor making magic items is hard. Yeah. Tailor making, just finding. Let's say you're playing rules as written, and just finding items that will help your characters in situations are hard.
So this is actually a really interesting thing for D&D, because I've dabbled into 5th edition. I used to play a lot of the old systems, but for 5th edition I haven't dabbled too much. But from what I've seen from watching stuff online and talking to people who've played 5th edition, is that there's not much use for gold.
Yes.
There's not that many items. Again, for permanent items, there's not many permanent items that the players get. So this concept, unlike, say, like Pathfinder's got a lot of different items, especially lots of consumables, kind of where it lines up. That's where we kind of thought of the idea. Well, actually, Jared thought of the idea for this concept was more consumables. Why not? So in 5th edition, this is a way for your players to understand that they can buy these things. And yet again, you go to a shop, you're not looking for this thing. You're not going there with a shopping list of things like, I need, A, B, C, and D, right? You're walking the ship is, what do you have for sale? And then the Pandora's box has been opened, and then you could find just about anything. And it's how you use it. Give your players the out-of-the-box thinking to, oh, wait, we don't have anything for the situation, except I bought this weird thing from this shop. This mummified head.
Yeah.
What does it do? Like, we don't know.
Yeah. Like, and you don't even have to use spells that are in the book.
Yeah.
You could just say it does something. A favorite one of mine is I found it. It was the ring of the goat, and everyone thought it was like the ring of the ram, and it was just a ring that I put in, and it had a bunch of different goats on it. And I was trying to, and this was back before wizards kind of worked in, and everyone worked in the concept of. I was trying to make it more realistic, right? Quote unquote, make the fantasy game more realistic. So I was trying to use my players to use consumables in the sense of consumables of goods. And like, okay, you've been on the road for 8 days, mark off all your rations. So someone was in a town, there was like a little rinky-dink town, mining town. They found this ring, and it was the ring of the goat, and it was a one-shot item, but it said if you use that item, you eat anything and you would be fine. It counted as rations. Like a goat, right? Like you could just eat a tin can. You could eat,
it's
grass.
It's like the goats from the cartoons then.
Yeah, it was a cartoon goat.
Yeah.
And the one player that got it loved it. He started and then actually used it in a very weird way. So they were trying to intimidate this, like, the mining boss.
Started eating rocks.
He did start just eating rocks. Activated and was just like, yo, you don't want to mess with me. And the guy, and he was a gnome. And the guy was just like, yo, I am a 6'2" half orc beast of a person. And he was like, you don't know my life. Like I've seen some stuff. And they were like level 4. And the dude just reached out and grabbed a rock and just started consuming it. And that was it. The guy was like, all right, whatever you need, man. Like, you eat rocks. Like, I'm not ready for this. Man. So that's kind of the conversation here. Is the conversation is like giving them items and having your players mess with them. It was a one-shot item, right? So he used it and said 24 hours. So he was like, all right, cool. But he used it in a great way. He got advantage on his intimidation check. And it was something that like made my players really like this.
Potential for this is
endless.
Yeah, basically endless. And it's also, it's a kind of how far you want to take it. And this also lets the GM custom make items that they would find you, like, yet again, maybe they're trying to find the weakness of the bad guy, and they do use those acorns to turn things to stone, right? And that's the only thing that can stop one of these creatures that the bad guy keeps summoning, right? So you can use it as like almost like a MacGuffin type thing where they need to collect this consumable item to progress.
Yeah. And I mean, like, also don't be afraid. And I think a lot of people are scared of having your players. And this was like, I find new GMs hesitate to give out magical items because they're afraid it will warp the game that they're hoping to play, right? Because you have to remember, modern Dungeons and Dragons, modern Pathfinder, whatever system you're playing, we've kind of all evolved back to what the original concept was, which was a cooperative storytelling game. The whole concept of the game master or the game arbiter versus the players came about when they were having tournaments, and we stopped doing that.
For the most part.
But that heritage kind of like carried forward through a number of systems, and now in 5th edition, I feel 5th edition and all modern tabletop role playing, like we're in the renaissance of like role playing games. Obviously, if you're playing a game like Morkborg, where was it for the 40K one? The Warhammer Fantasy,
Warhammer Fantasy,
like those are a much darker and much more made. Like I know Morkborg has like a timetable where like if you don't it just bad things happen. Like it just gets bad. It's a great system. I'm not downing these systems.
Yeah. It's just like for the most part, most people when they talk about role playing games, they're talking about these high fantasy heroic. You're the group of heroes. You're, Legolas and Aragorn going to destroy the ring and fight the thousands of orcs or take your pick of any fantasy genre. You're Conan going through and it's more dark fantasy. But still, you're the hero trying to stop something bad from happening for the most part.
Yeah,
doesn't mean that the not most part is less.
Yeah.
It's just this is kind of what most people think of and play when we're talking about
high fantasy, more or less. Obviously you wouldn't see something like this in Call of Cthulhu. I mean, you might, but it might drive you mad, and then that's the end of your character. Yeah. So, but like, and that's kind of the point of this is give your characters that one shot item. It does something really funny or cool or whatever you want to say. Like I usually lean into the cool / funny. I know some people might lean just hard into like, oh, that was really, really awesome. Some people might lean into like the really absurd, but absurd usually creates way more really awesome things. Like just before we were talking about all the magic items you guys got, I gave them a black pearl that doubled gravity, and we were playing through the campaign. I didn't prep this, mind you. This was not prepped. I gave it to them in hopes of them figuring out when to use it, or if there was a flying enemy to help ground the enemy closer to the ground.
And this is an important point. We're going to get to like kind of how this item was used. But you may have a thought of how this item is used.
It's never going to happen.
It'll never, I will say 90 to 95% of the time, they'll use it in a way that you have never thought of as a GM, and that's not bad. Don't be worried about it.
Yeah.
Educate it as best you can, but let it ride.
Yeah, always let it ride. Let the dice fall. So the party, so the party is going. There's a lot of like this crazy mist. They have to use a specific spell to move through the mist, and they only have so many actions to use, and they get lost, right? They have a hiccup in their plan. The party gets lost, and they get to this ravine, and they move the mist, but they know they have to get over the ravine, and it's 60 feet, and they have no clue how to get over this ravine.
Because it's not just the players. We're actually having a whole entourage of wizards that we're escorting to cast more of these spells, so we don't get eaten by the mist.
Yeah, because straight out of Stephen King, The Mist, right? Like the bad stuff in the mist.
It's just bad.
Yeah. So they get to the ravine, and one of the players, the wizard, he looks at his sheet, he's going over his stuff, and as all in my head, that's how wizards would be. They'd be flipping through their book, trying to find the answer. Yeah, they're rules arbiters, but they change the rules.
Yeah.
Right. So they're reality arbiters, and so he's flipping through his stuff, and the players are like, okay, well, we have rope. We can maybe shoot an arrow and like tightrope across, but these other wizards are definitely not going to make it. Also, we had a player who's a paladin and they're in full plate. And they're like, I'm probably not going to make it across. Like maybe we can like sling, like throw us, or it's like maybe someone has like a floating disc or something. And the wizard looks up and he goes, damn, I didn't want to use a spell this early on, but I'm going to use, there's a spell. We're playing Pathfinder 2nd edition. So if you look for this, if you like it and you're playing 5th edition, you could just alter it for 5th edition. Yeah, make it happen. I'm sure it's already in 5th edition somewhere. So many spells have
gravity manipulation.
Yeah, it's a gravity manipulation spell, and basically they cast a spell, and if everyone fails their check, they're drawn 30 feet to the spot.
Yes.
So
it just sucks everything in 30 feet.
Yeah. So his concept was, and it only lasts for one round, right?
It
so,
literally is almost, I mean, basically it's like a fireball where it's instantaneous.
Yeah.
So it happens and it's gone.
Mm-hmm. So his idea was everyone would run, jump, and then he would cast it the rest of the 30 feet, and then everyone would get pulled
sucked into to the other side of
the other side. And that was a genius plan, but people started having, like, people got really hesitant.
Yeah, because failing is basically dying.
Yeah, it was like everyone got very hesitant.
And
so
also we're like I said, we're not just us. It's a bunch of, it was like 12 wizards.
12
wizards and guards to protect them.
Yeah, it was 20.
It's a lot of people.
It was 24. It was 12 wizards and 12 guards, a guard for every wizard, plus the 6 people in the party.
Yeah, 5.
5 people. Sorry, 5 people. I always count myself. Yeah.
So we were like, man, we can do this. And then the discussion happened. Well, what happens if we fail? Or how does it actually work? And then we're looking up the spell and we're looking up the rules and we're asking Jared, well, how would this play out to a point where, we're not asking for the future, but we're asking for like, how would this work?
Like, is this like, are we doing it the way we think we're doing it?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like if you read Mage Hand, it says you can move something. And the first thing everyone says is, "Oh, I'll move a person."
It's too heavy.
But it's too heavy per the rules. So they were just double checking with me, the game master, to double check. They'll be like, "Hey, guy, like GM, like I know this is like a weird question, but am I reading this correctly?"
Yeah.
And it also did require that everyone failed. And in earlier editions of all games, there was an opt to fail. And I think a lot of people still play with that. I'm not sure.
Here's the thing, for Pathfinder 2nd edition, I don't think that's a rule because some spells specifically list that you can choose to fail or you can pick whatever failure state you want for these certain spells. Mm-hmm. So that implies that you can only do it when it lists you can.
Yeah.
So this one didn't list it.
So they were asking, they were like, well, can we opt to fail? Because like, theoretically we're jumping and we want it to happen.
Yeah, we want to get sucked into the void.
Yeah. So as they're talking about this and lovingly,
void.
Just right into the void. Just the void. Avoid the void. And so as they're doing this, finally the wizard's like, I'm doing it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we're doing this. And the wizard, begins an incantation. And Steve, the paladin,
I'm looking through my notes,
and he's looking through his notes, and he looks, and whenever Steve gets a crazy idea, you see it in his eyes. His eyes light up like Christmas lights. He's just like, oh, it's about to go down. He goes, so he looks up, crazy-eyed, wide-eyed and crazy-eyed.
Crazy-eyed pal.
He goes, hey, guys, and he's talking to the table.
I just popped up on the box and went, we have this pearl that messes with gravity. Mm-hmm. Can we use this?
And they did, and they threw it in the other field because they weren't 100% sure.
Plus, we had to make the first 30 feet.
Yeah,
I wasn't confident in everyone making the first 30 feet.
Yeah, some of the players have dumped strength as there,
and not even that, but some of the wizards go, "Whoop, oh, you're dead."
And
I'm
also,
sorry.
Also, what happened was Steve was kind of setting it so that I didn't have to make a 24 different rolls.
That's the other thing is the same thing is I made a perception check and I did an insight check against the GM. Yeah. And I kept looking at because we were playing online, and I'm like, it doesn't seem that Jared's too convinced about this idea.
Yeah, I was just like, in my head, I was like, I now have to make 20.
Dying.
I was like, I have to make 24 rolls. These are NPCs. I know their stats, and it's going to be bad biscuits. I was going to have to make 24 rolls with these NPCs and their standard NPCs. Yes, they're wizards and guards, so the guards clearly have high athletics, but the wizards definitely do not.
Even high athletics, with 12 rolls, even for the guards, someone's gonna roll 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, or even less than 10.
Yeah, less than 10.
Not making it. Yeah. And then it's still this having to roll those rolls and doing the math and seeing who dies, and then do we have enough to get there? Do we have enough to get back? It was like a lot of questions, and I saw the gleam of
people were dying. Like I was gonna be like 4 guards and 4 wizards die. Figure it out.
I saw the bloodlust in the GM's eyes.
Yeah,
but I'm like, wait a minute. We have this box of crap. This pearl.
Yeah.
we're using a spell that messes with gravity. This messes with gravity. Can we use these together?
And they used it together, and they doubled the rate so that he threw it, and the wizard cast their spell at the same time. Like they were kind of overlapping, and basically I was just like, well, as I understand it, you guys now have created definitely like an event horizon.
I was just gonna say event horizon.
But I'm just gonna say you pull up like all the earth, and it becomes like very like magical, where you see like it starts creating almost like a land bridge
almost like a land bridge, but with floating
debris and stuff, and like the players are now running across it.
It was cool.
And then at the very end, obviously I can't have them just win. I was like, a graboid straight from Tremors just comes up because they pulled up so much earth.
They pulled up the graboid.
They pulled it up, and it's like, I'm mad because I'm in the air. And that's where we left it. But like that was the concept, and I didn't think they were going to use that, right? Like I didn't prep any of those steps.
Yeah, for that item to be used. It was just like, yet again, this is when you're giving these items to the players, know that they're going to use them in places that you didn't expect to.
Yeah. Always know that like it's okay to let them use it. And I think also a lot of times, and I've seen this before, players will get done with a session and look at their sheet, especially in high fantasy games where they have a lot of magic items or they have a lot of spells. And players will just get done and look at their sheet and be like, oh, I had like 3 things I could have used in that fight. All right. And then all of a sudden it devalues the magical items that aren't awesome, right? Like, oh, I got a wand of, magic missile. That's awesome. Oh, I got breastplate of flying. Like, oh man, that's cool. But
players will tend to remember the things they use all the time. Their weapon, that one wand they use all the time, their armor, like, oh, like you said, lets me fly.
Boots of striding and jumping.
When you have an inventory of a bunch of items, that can get cumbersome. So like, oh, okay, well, I have like 10 potions, 5 of them are healing potions. I have a bark skin potion, I got this potion, that potion. Oh man, I got more stuff. Oh, I'm tired.
Yeah.
And they just lose interest, not even lose interest, but they lose interest in all the other stuff. And then when that moment happens for that one item, like, oh, it's perfect for this. I bought this for this one thing. They forget that's even in their inventory.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to figure out another way to use all their normal stuff to get through.
Yeah. That literally is what happened. So so my suggestion, right, like I said earlier, is sit down, and this is a great even group building exercise with your friends and your teammates and the people you're playing with. Sit down, like I said, go through the trinkets, get like very mundane things like, oh, I got a pen, I just grabbed it off the table.
Yeah, well, and now it's a quill.
And now, yeah, it's a quill. So I have a quill. What can this quill do? Oh, well, I feel that like, it's made out of a feather, right? Okay, so it's a feather. So if I tickle someone's nose, it causes them to be able to talk to birds. They for 1d4 hours they only speak in avian, and that's hysterical. But they might
also detrimental because they only speak in a language that they can't.
Yeah, like no one else will understand them. Yeah. But you never know. Maybe like you could then be like, oh, this is the high priestess from the air temple, and oh, they only speak in avian, and maybe like suddenly there's like this wizard sage, and the sage is like, I do too, and all of a sudden everyone's bluff is like, oh, and then they're like, and now they've used that one item, or like, and you could even just get like silly. I have a card of ruin, and everyone was like, what is that? Yes. And I was like, it's a card, and if you throw it and you hit a target, it ruins it, right? But it's not like a 10 by 10 or a 30 by 30. It's just whatever it hits. So if you hit like a door with it, the door just crumbles and falls apart. If you hit a person, they become broke. Like they don't die, they just lose all their wealth just goes.
It's why the first thing when you said ruin and you started describing it, I'm like, that's literally a card out of the deck of many things.
Yeah,
that's ruin. It's like, oh, you just lost all your money.
Yeah,
all your titles and everything.
So just imagine you're arguing with like, let's say there's a jerk NPC. You're like, you know what? And that's it. Like
Horgus getting hit by that.
Yeah, or just whoever you're mad at. Or again, there's a door and the road. I
was thinking all the utility use of that item. Like, oh man, there's we know on the other side of this wall is where we need to be, but it's a wall. hit the wall with the card, and then we'll be able to bust through the wall.
Yeah. Or even get crazier with it. Like, let's say you're fighting on like a second story and you hit the floor and the enemy falls through.
Yeah.
But like all of a sudden, like it just, and then it becomes like it changes the entire encounter. Like, okay, the bad guy fell through, but the rest of the floor starts to grow weaker and weaker.
Yeah.
And now everyone's making athletics checks to just run across the floor without falling through.
Deteriorating.
Yeah. And then, maybe a player was like too far away and they fell too. And now it changes the course of a game where it becomes way more fun.
So bringing us to that point, because that card is ridiculously powerful.
Yes.
Balance. How would you go ahead and balance? Like, look, you came out with an item that did some really cool thing. You thought it was a really cool idea. And then you realize, oh, I made a poor decision. This is way too powerful. Whether it was a way that the players came up to using it, or that it was just pure design. You just didn't think of it, and now it's in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I've done that before, right? We've all done that as unexperienced or even experienced GMs. At one point, a player was like, I forgot what happened. They might have said it was a Sphinx or something, and the Sphinx like granted one of them like an ability, and I was like, just roll a D100, and I went down the wizard's chart, the wizard spell chart, and this was in 5th edition, and I just kept going. I was just like, all right, well, it'd be like, what level spell? Roll a D8, right? Because that's the number. It will dictate the level, and they rolled like a 6. And I was like, okay, you got this spell. And it was a globe of invulnerability. Was casted on their like boots. Whenever they wore it, they were surrounded by it. And that I was like, well, I screwed the pooch on that one. That was my bad. I had to come up with I had to get rid of it, right? Like, because it became so overpowered and
Funny enough is that there is a fix for that.
You
make it that he can activate it one time.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the fix. And so with, coming back into this with balancing, first off, it's a one-shot item. So you might have given them the dice, and if they roll a 1 on that D6, it creates a sphere of annihilation. Fine. Like the one time they use it, that's it. But also that sphere is still there, and then all of a sudden it starts sucking in things and now becomes a detriment. So it's also, well, they threw it in the dragon and they rolled a 1 and sucked the dragon in, but now it's also sucking in the trees and the birds and the bees. So it being a one-shot item kind of mitigates balance a little bit. B, let's say it is something that's like crazy powerful. Give it a time limit, but like a really whack time limit, like D4 rounds, not minutes, rounds. Or flip a coin. Every time you flip the coin, it could theoretically just stop. So like you flip a coin, you're like, oh, okay, if it lands heads, the spell keeps going. But if the one time it lands tails, it breaks. And
because these are consumable items.
Yeah, it just instantly stops. The spell stops. That's also fun because they're like, oh man,
is this the turn?
Is this the turn? Oh,
still going.
Yeah. So time limits is a good way to mitigate how much. Eating up actions is also a great way to mitigate.
This depends on the system you're running with, because the time limit is basically any most system. Most systems are going to have some sort of measure of time. But when it comes to actions, different systems use different actions. So it's kind of based off of the system you're playing in. So let's say for 5th edition, you have an attack, a move, and a bonus action, right?
Well, you have your move action, and your generic action that can be action, like
move action and bonus action. Yeah. So depending on the item, you thought it was okay, it was cool for this to be a bonus action, because most characters don't have interesting bonus actions that they can do, or maybe they have ones they can only use once every long rest. So once they use it, then they have no bonus actions to use. So they can then you can start using the bonus. But man, that item is really too powerful for a bonus action. You start making it a move action, or if it's move related,
yeah,
you make it their whole turn. You make it their action, or you make it their whole turn. Like the whole turn, they can't move, they can't bonus action.
Yeah,
they just got to work on doing the thing.
It's the Rubik's Cube of Doom, and they have to Rubik's Cube.
They got to fix it.
Yeah, they're just and that's their whole turn. So it's eating actions. You know, for us, we play Pathfinder Second Edition. There's the action system is vastly different, and not going into great detail. But everyone on their turn has 3 actions. So I could say, okay, using this eats 2 actions. Yeah. And they go, oh,
it's like
wow.
casting a spell. It's like you got to really concentrate on getting the magic out of the item.
Yeah, not everyone in our game has a reaction, unlike 5th edition, where everyone has a reaction. In Pathfinder 2nd edition, certain classes have reactions. Mm-hmm. You can give it you could say, okay, this gives you this reaction. And now that gives a character a reaction. But let's say, for us, you're a paladin, and you have your shield up, and you want to shield block, which takes a reaction. Suddenly you're like, oh man, which one am I doing? And also it's a consumable, and it's instantaneous consumable
for the most part.
Yeah. So time limits, eating, and mitigated by actions, and last but not least is the greatest of all of them, and that's just it doesn't act the same way you thought it would. So obviously, I always tell my players what it does, right? But sometimes you give them something like the quill of curing, and they go, "Huh, does it cure?" And you're like, "Yeah, it does cure."
I remember this.
And then the player is like, "I'm going to use the quill of curing. How much does it cure?" And you're like, "Okay, cool. All edible meat is now cured." And they're like,
beef jerky.
"You've made a ton of beef jerky." And the player's like, "Oh no."
And they use it in the middle of combat. Now the big ogres are going to whack him again.
Yeah.
And they thought they were going to get a whole bunch of healing back.
And just turned a lot of stuff into beef jerky.
You want to use your essence for a while.
Yeah, you there you go. It fixes that system. So that's kind of the mitigation is the name, or that's
also,
not too powerful.
And also how situational is the item.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about the that gravity pearl. It's like, when were we going to think about using this? But then the situation came up and it was like the perfect situation. So a lot of these items that you're probably going to come up with, whether they're kind of wacky or they're like action specific, not main like actions as players. I have X amount of actions, more like action movie, like it does something really cool.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter to the point where they're just consumables and they can just, it's a big bang and then it's over. So
yeah. And this actually came up. Can the players make more of these? Now it depends on your system, right? 5th edition, and this isn't a knock on any systems. Please, by no means take this as us being mean to any system. 5th edition doesn't have a very robust creation system. I feel that was an intentional part on the creators to allow the game masters or the people running the game to kind of homebrew their concepts. So, okay, if you want to make this, you need this, this, and this, and this is how it works in my world. In Steve's world, it's a little different. In Fabio's world, it's a little different there. So, let's say you have a player who wants to create these items. Fine. But they're super weird, right? So, the quill that lets you create curing, well, it has to be a feather from buffalo wings. So they have to find these mythological flying buffalo and get a feather from one of its wings. And then, okay, cool. And then you have to be able, then you have to find, the honey from a bee from the plains of Elysium, and now it becomes a quest. So is it really worth making it?
Or you can even say, if you're even in 5th edition or in Pathfinder or any system, because any system you can make stuff.
Yeah,
you can just say you can make stuff if you kind of focus your character on making stuff, and especially you have like an intelligence or whatever system you're using that has like, look, I'm going to pick this stat and this stat says I'm really, really smart. You can technically let them craft it, but like you said, these kind of items sometimes are out there.
Yeah.
Right? This pearl, given a certain situation, could be detrimental if we had 10 of them. What happens if you cast 10 of them and then he casts that spell? Like, now we have to figure that out. So what you can do is you allow,
it just inverts everything.
Yeah. So, or you have the item that we haven't used yet, which is the piece of chainmail that doubles your armor class. Now, if we all roll around with 10 of them and it's never off, we're never being hit. So that's a problem. Regardless if it's only lasts one round, if we each have 10 of them, that's an issue.
Yeah.
So what you can let them do is you can let the player spend time in retrofitting the item. So it makes them feel that they've spent their crafting points and their intelligence points in the right spot, and they feel rewarded for doing it because now they have something to do. They're trying to break down this item, and let them break the item, by the way. They're breaking down the item and trying to figure out how it works. But in the process, some of the mysticism was broken, and they get a lesser version that they're allowed to make more of. So that item that doubled their armor class, well, they can't, like you said, it came from a thing where it's unattainable to find exactly where this piece of it was armor from an angel's armor from a war long since gone, right? They're not getting another piece of that armor, but they can try to put some of that magic and to another random piece of armor that they can find. So they can craft a random piece of armor, put this magic into it, and now the person gets a trinket that lets them activate it to get +1 or +2 in their armor class on an incoming attack.
Okay.
Right? So it's something that they felt that they were rewarded for. You're making an item that may not exist in your game, and now they can spend time and obviously money and resources. So it goes back to 5th edition where it finds another use for money. There's not many uses for money in 5th edition. Like I said, it's not a knock. It's just the way that system operates. So let them break some of these items down, and then you can even just say, no, you can't break this item down. You tried figuring it out. You spent your days, your weeks, your months. It's beyond you.
Yeah.
You could just say that they can't replicate it.
Yeah. I definitely want the buffalo wing. That's those monsters are now real in my world. Yeah, like you want to allow the players a chance. You can, again, saying no never hurts. You see a ton of videos online on YouTube talking about how it's okay to say no as a GM. You're not hurting anyone's feelings, right? Like if you wanted to take that and bring it into the real world, no matter how much I want to fly, I get the big no.
I gotta get in a plane.
Yeah, like there are other ways around it, but and in that situation, like if my player's like, oh, I want to make 1 million of those gravitational pearls, no, like it's no. Or maybe it works, but now you're just getting a lesser form of that spell the wizard cast.
Yeah.
It can only pull one enemy, or it makes in a 5-foot square.
Maybe just make some ground difficult terrain.
Yeah, something.
And then you also apply in depending on the system, like especially with Pathfinder, everything that has a value that you have to craft has to have a value.
Yeah.
So you can assign a value to it, and that yet again could also key you in on if it's more powerful, it should be more expensive to make. Yet again, whatever lesser version that you're letting them make. So maybe we are allowed to make the pearls, but if we want to make the feather of curing, maybe that's 10 gold. That's not that much.
Yeah.
Right. But that orb of the pearl, the gravity pearl, that's like 250 gold to make.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Whatever.
1,000 gold. It doesn't matter. You're just picking the more expensive it is, the more powerful it generally is going to be.
Yeah. And I feel like that's just generally good advice. And again, remember, it's your world. Maybe you hate this concept. Maybe this is the worst concept you've ever heard. And you're like, yo, real talk.
But add the feather of curing to your world.
Yeah, you should. That's just the coolest item ever. So let us know in the comments below. Obviously, like and subscribe if you can. If you like what we're doing here, if you have any more concepts, ideas that you would like us to talk about, we would love to talk about. Obviously, let us know. You could shoot us an email. MVN.
We read the comments too.
Read the comment. We read the comments a lot. Actually, I respond to the comments way more than I need to. No, it's good to talk to the friends.
Work.
Yeah, I'm gonna work. But yeah, if you like what we do here, like and subscribe if you can. And yeah, so from myself here and Steve from Nothing Venture, Nothing Game, want to say we love rolling dice, giving advice with a little bit of that New York spice. Peace.
Later.